Hi, in this video we'll see how to animate a simple bouncing ball in Maya. I have here a new empty scene in Maya, and before I can start animating, I'm going to create a simple ground plane for the ball to bounce on as well as a ball. So I'm just creating a simple NURBS plane and a NURBS sphere. I want to keep this animation really simple, so I'm going to animate this ball moving straight along the x-axis, and as it moves, it bounces up and down along the y-axis. So I turn my view. I can turn off the grid since I don't really need it. I have a ground plane now. I'm going to animate the bouncing ball starting up here, falling down, and then bouncing along. And with each bounce, it's going to lose some height, some energy, and then it's going to come to a stop. And the entire bounce will take no more than a few seconds. So first I'm going to set my timeline to just the right number of frames that I need. Now in my animation preferences over here, in my settings, I see that my scene is at 24 frames per second. So for a 3-second or so animation, I need about 72 frames. I'm going to set my timeline to, let's say, just about 75. At frame 1, I move the ball into the first position. Now when we animate by setting keyframes which record or remember the position, rotation, scale, and any other properties of the object that we are animating. So at frame 1, I want Maya to remember that this is the position of this ball. So at frame 1, I move the ball over here, and then to set a keyframe, I press the S key on my keyboard. Now as soon as I press S, you'll notice I get a red mark on frame 1. That mark shows that there is a keyframe here, and also all my visible attributes in my channel box turn red. So at frame 1, the ball is over here. So let's say a few frames along the way, maybe around frame 6. I move the ball forward and down till it touches the ground here. And then I press S again. Now the next bounce is going to be shorter, so if it took 5 frames for the ball to go from here down to here, it won't take long for the ball to bounce up to the next peak. So about 4 frames, that is frame 10, I move the ball up here and press S again. And in another 4 frames, around frame 14, the ball comes down and touches the ground here. And then I press S again. So this is what I have so far. So you can see it's starting to move. It's not a very good animation yet, but we will get to that. For the next bounce, which will be even shorter, I'll just give it about 3 frames. So frame 17, I'll move the ball up and to the right, press S, and then frame 20, move the ball down and to the right. And as you can see, once I press S, I have my second bounce, but of course we've run out of space, so maybe I'll just have the ball fall off after a few frames. So going a few frames down, around frame 23, I just have the ball fall off the screen and press S. So now let's see what our animation is like. Okay, as we can see, it's really fast. So timing is one of the things we need to pay attention to in animation. So right now, this animation plays really fast. Let me make sure that this is showing me the real speed And the way I do that is in my animation preferences. I look at my time slider preferences, and here it says playback speed, play every frame. If I want to see the real timing of this animation in Maya, I need to change this to real time. Save the preferences, and now go back and play again. These are all our playback controls that help us rewind, skip to the end, play the animation, and so on. I can even step forward frame by frame. So let's play this and see at real time. Okay, so it's not that fast. That's a better speed, and that's actually the speed that I'm going to get if I render out this animation. The problem is that it doesn't look very realistic as a bounce because it just seems to be going through the movements at a uniform speed. It doesn't feel like it's really under the force of gravity. It has no change in speed at all, and that's why it's not looking very realistic. So let me show you how can we improve the speed or the timing of this animation. So first, just looking at the basics of a bouncing ball, anytime an object falls to the ground, it gets faster as it falls. So we want the ball to start moving faster as it approaches the ground. Also, because it hits the ground fast, it's going to bounce off the ground fast. So we need to make sure that the ball leaves the ground fast. But then, because it's going to change direction from moving up to moving down, anytime a real object changes direction, it must slow down. That's the only way you can change direction. Think about when you're driving a car and you want to turn. You can't make the turn if you're going fast. You have to slow down to make the turn and stay stable. Same thing with the ball. As it's moving up and it reverses direction to move down, it's going to slow down. So at the peak or the high point of every bounce, this ball is going to slow down. So we have a pattern here. Every time the ball hits the ground and bounces off, it should be fast. And every time the ball reaches the top of a bounce, it should slow down. So we have fast, slow, fast, slow, fast, slow, and so on. Well, in this case, it won't slow down. It'll just keep speeding up as it falls down. So how do we change the speed of our bouncing ball? To do that, we go into what's called the graph editor. You'll find it under Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. So the graph editor shows you a graphical depiction of how things are moving over time in your scene. Let's zoom in and take a look at this. So without selecting anything, I'm just going to press F to zoom and see all the curves. Just like you can press F in the viewport to frame all the objects, in the graph editor you can press F to frame all the curves in your window. Now, one thing to know about the graph editor, it only shows the graphs of the object that you select. So if I select the ground plane, I don't see anything. If I select nothing, I don't see anything. Only when I select the ball do I see the graph, because the ball is the only object in my scene that has animation applied to it. So let's take a closer look at what's going on here. You see green graphs, blue graphs, red graphs. All of these relate to what I'm seeing over here. So for example, translate X is the movement of the ball from left to right. So this is the graph for the left to right movement of the ball, which is pretty uniform, and I'm okay with that at this point. The main one we need to see is translate Y. This is the up and down movement of the ball. So you can see the movement of the ball as I scrub through the timeline. I also see the time slider scrubbing through in the graph editor, and as I can see my animation on the side, I can relate it to what's going on in the graph. So this is up, this is down, and this is just time going from frame 1 across to frame 23. So this is a graph of the up and down movement of the ball over time. And what I have here is at frame 6, you notice that the graph is just drifting in and out of this keyframe. All these black dots are keyframes, and the curves are the in-betweens. Now keyframes are okay, but we want to change the in-betweens to make the ball move fast as it approaches frame 6, move fast as it leaves frame 6, then slow down as it approaches frame 10, and start slow and slowly pick up speed as it leaves frame 10, so that it's fast again at frame 14. Again, we want that fast, slow pattern. So the way to do that in the graph editor is actually easier than it looks. Every keyframe on the graph has these tangents attached to them, and by moving the tangents or changing the tangents, I can change the in-betweens. So I can leave the keyframes as they are, but change the in-betweens just by moving the tangents. We want this kind of a bounce where the ball isn't moving much, isn't changing much in height here, so it's slow, but then you have a very steep curve as it approaches frame 6. Now remember one thing, gentle slopes in the graph editor correspond with slow movements in your scene, and steep slopes in the graph editor correspond with fast movements in your scene. So at frame 6, we want the slope of our graph to be steep, sort of like this. But the problem is when I make it steep on one side, it actually goes down. Watch what that does. It'll make my sphere move through the ground. That's not what I want. So to make the ball go fast as it approaches the ground and then leave the ground fast, I need to have this kind of a steep slope here and a steep slope here. But as you can see, every time I move one side of the tangent, the other side gets messed up, so again the ball is going to go through the ground. To be able to get this kind of steep slope on both sides, here's what I need to do. I select my keyframe and then go to Tangents, Break Tangents. By breaking the tangents, I can move one side without affecting the other. So now I can move this tangent up to get a nice steep slope here, and then I can select this tangent and also move it up to get a nice steep slope here. What this does is, watch this. So though my bounce looks nice and fast here, the ball starts moving slowly and then it hits the ground really fast, and then it bounces off the ground fast. So just by changing the tangents this way, I got rid of the slow drifting movement and replaced it with a fast, realistic bounce. So I'm going to do the same at all the other keyframes where it hits the ground. Select the keyframe, break the tangents, and then just click and drag the tangent to change the shape. And as for the end, when the ball simply rolls off the ground, I don't need to break the tangent here. I can just move the tangent this way to make sure that it starts slow and then falls fast, and that should be enough. So let's go back and play this animation. Okay, so my animation is looking better, but just to be able to play it back again and again, I don't need all these frames since my animation ends at frame 23. So to change my timeline so that it's only showing me this part of the animation, I can change this gray bar called the range slider, click on the end which is 75 and drag it in. So even though my scene is 75 frames long, my timeline is only showing me about 25 frames, and that's all I need. Now I can play the animation. That's a much better bouncing ball. Now to see what it would look like in the movie, instead of watching it in Maya, I'm going to make what's called a play blast, or a rough preview render of my animation. So first, I'll save the file, and then go to Window, Play Blast, and then choose the Play Blast options by clicking on this square. My time range is my time slider, so only the frames that are visible in my time slider will be rendered into a movie. Now the scale says that it's going to show me it's going to create a movie that's half the size of this window. And that's okay for now, so I'll just hit Play Blast. It quickly goes through and makes this movie for me. So let's loop the movie in QuickTime and just watch. So that's a nice happy looking bounce. In the next part of the video, I'll show you how to add squash and stretch to make this bounce look even better.